How are y'all doing? All right, so the goal of this talk today is to figure out what you're going to do on Monday. So you're going to rewrite your whole app with hooks probably, right? Like that's like thing one. Like just everything's got to go. But no. And every single thing also needs to be with suspense because it has to be used. But no, the goal of my talk today is to convince you not to rewrite your app. And over the course of the next 30 minutes or so, I'm going to show how you're going to incrementally approach the next probably week or two or a couple months of your job by using suspense to enhance the way your application not only loads modules, but also assets and eventually data. So a little bit about me. Jared Palmer, at Jared Palmer on Twitter. I am the lead engineer at the Palmer Group. We are a strategy, design, and engineering firm based in New York. We help large businesses, enterprise, with mostly digital transformation. In doing all of that, I actually pump out a lot of open source stuff too. You may be familiar with some of my libraries. Maybe you use them. Formix, form library for React. Razzle is for server-side rendering. React FNS is a handful of render props, and high-order components for mostly wrapping web and web APIs. And Backpack is for Node, like lambdas and backends and such. We're going to get to React FNS a little bit later because it kind of will come back and apply. But back to the moment we all been waiting for, the topic of discussion. Loading stuff is hard. How many people write the word is loading like more than 10 times a day? Right? Like, I just keep writing this word. It's just like, it's like that movie with it's like number 23. You just keep seeing it. Yeah, so loading stuff's hard. And if you think about your applications, a lot of time and energy is focused on just coordinating this, like stuff when it comes in, when it comes out, what to show the user, what not to show the user. And ultimately, what ends up happening is you have some great application, some idea, and you read on Twitter like, oh, I need to make it so fast and so amazing. I need to minimize everything. I need to optimize performance, so you make it fast. And to do that, you defer non-critical resources. What does that mean? So you're going to maybe lazy load your bundle. You're going to split out data into just component parts all over your screen. And you're going to make sure that your users get to your app, the good stuff, as fast as possible. But in doing so, you've introduced this conflict because you end up having all these loading indicators that Andrew just showed off and how those can kind of actually be detrimental to user experience. So Suspense can help us there. And so what I'm going to do now is show you a little application I built. Oops. A little application I built. It's called Suspensify. And yeah, so it's Drake and Big Sean and Ken Wheeler. So, okay. So it's built with Create React App. It uses good old local set state. No Redux, no Apollo, no Relay. Uses Reach Router. Again, I was trying to make this fast, right? So I implemented code splitting on my own. I'll go into that in a second. It's got a home page, and it's got an artist page. And you saw those spinners already, right? We're going to get there in a little bit. But you can, play awesome music, like this sick Drake track, like just the best, most amazing. There's copyright issues, so I had to go with the Mozart. Just this awesome, just bumping right now. Unreal. Okay, so I'll turn that off. But it plays music. It's got some albums. Cool. But it's got tons of loading spinners, so let's just do that again. Right, so this is on a decent connection, right? But if we actually slow things down, and I stole this widget shamelessly from, I think Dan maybe wrote it? All right, anyway, let's slow this thing down a lot. So oftentimes we want to make our apps responsive on slow connections, so we have all these loading indicators, right? And that's great, because in a situation like that, you want to give the user some feedback that the app's still like working, because nothing's worse than seeing nothing, right? But on like super fast connections, this gets pretty janky, just like Andrew showed, right? Like it would be better just for that to be instantaneous. So Suspense can help us there. So let's get to it. So the goal of this is to show, like, basically build an app that would be probably similar to the apps that you're going to, that you all build, and take you through how you can move to Suspense and how you can incrementally adopt this. Again, everything's opt-in. You don't have to do this. Only do this if it makes sense, and you'll find situations where maybe you don't want to because it's not really worth it. So, step one. We need to enable something called strict mode and make sure that our application passes strict mode. And what strict mode is, it's a little wrapper that you can throw at the top of your application to just make sure that you're not using any deprecated APIs. So we're just going to wrap our app in React.strict mode. And you can actually do this in production, and there's no downside. Strict mode. Okay, so let's pull up the console here, and it looks like we have a little error. So this error is because we're using a deprecated lifecycle. And we're using that deprecated lifecycle in our little code split component. So this is this code split component I wrote. And what it does is it takes a function that utilizes Webpack's dynamic import. That function's got to return a promise that resolves to a component. It stores that component. If that component exists, it just renders it immediately. But this all happens in will mount, which has been deprecated. So we're just going to read this message and listen to it, and we're going to move it to did mount. So will mount was going to block the render. Okay, so we fixed that. So we click around our application, and we're good. No more errors. No more warnings, I should say. So cool. So we're in business. We've done sort of step 0 here. So we can remove this. And Andrew showed that you can start using Suspense without enabling concurrent React. But for the purposes of this demo, in order to allow React to actually take advantage of that, in order for React to actually wait and pause rendering, we need to enable concurrent mode. So let's do that now. So we're all familiar with React render. That's how we mount our applications to the DOM. So there's a new way to do that, though, with concurrent React, and that's called create root. So it's kind of similar, a little different. So we're just going to react.dom.create root. And we're going to pass it a DOM node. And then we're going to call .render. And we're going to pass in our app. All right. And look at that, nothing changed. That's like a big deal, right? Like you just enable concurrent React. That's awesome. Okay, so we still have spinners. Remember, this is all incremental. So now that we're in concurrent React, we're going to take a note from Andrew and go into our app component. And we're going to basically wrap the whole thing. Oops. We're going to wrap the whole thing in React Suspense. React.suspense. And this is going to take a fallback. And we're going to make a big old spinner here. Spinner. Booyah. Auto import. Okay. Let's go back to the top here. Okay. So I had this code split component thing, but I don't need it anymore because now React has react.lazy. So let's just lose this. So what's going to be really weird about this live coding demo is I think I'm about to delete more code that I'm actually going to write. So that should excite all of you because deleting code is great. All right, so let's get rid of this. We're just going to do react.lazy here. And with react.lazy, before I was taking out, manually grabbing the default export from my Webpack dynamic import. That's this right here. But react.lazy expects that anyways, so I can just go ahead and delete that too. Okay, so now I want to show you that the chunks are still loading. So I'm going to go to the Network tab, and I'm going to refresh the page. And if we scroll back up to the top here, whoops, let's see. We scrolled back up to the top. We saw chunk 1 there, 2 there. Let's see. We keep going. That's the home page chunk. And if we go back to the artist page, we don't load another chunk, and that's because it's cached now. So that's React.lazy and Suspense. Pretty cool. So we're moving along. So, as I said, the first thing you probably are going to do is take care of deferring modules and using React Lazy. But the second thing you can do is use Suspense for assets. So images, video, audio, script tags, style sheets, fonts. Yeah, fonts. So it's cool because you can pause rendering and coordinate really challenging or otherwise difficult loading states. So let's take a look at our artist page here. We're going to concentrate on this for a second here. So our artist page, it's split up into three components. It's got the details, which is up here. It's got top tracks, and it's got albums. And each one of these is your classic data component responsible for data. It's got some state. In did mount, it fetches some stuff. It sets as loading. It's got some logic. It shows a spinner if it's loading. And then it shows the thing. And that's cool. So in this artist header, we have this image here. And on fast connections, it's totally fine. It's pretty clear. And this little API I built actually has multiple versions of every image. So on fast connections, it's great. Our users, on a MacBook Pro, our users get really high-res photos. But if we were to be on a slow network, it would be less than ideal. So let's go to our network tab here. And let's take this down. I'm just going to put this onto like even fast 3G. Let's go back for a second here. Yeah, that's not great, the way those images are coming in. Not good. Makes me sad. So not everybody's on a MacBook Pro. And so it'd be better if we could show something, some sort of version of the image that maybe was optimized for bad connections. So one technique that's pretty popular is to use something called a low-quality image placeholder. And the idea there is you take a smaller version of the same image and you load that as fast as possible. And in the background, you load the high-res version. And then when the high-res version is ready, you swap it in. So that's pretty cool. Normally, you would have to do that every single time. And what I mean by that is it's basically like, it's still a loading, it's still a spinner, right? It's still a concept of a loading state to have that low-quality version and then flip it in. But with Suspense, what you can do is you can add a Suspense component, and we're about to do this in a second, and you can let React figure out whether or not it should stop what it's doing and wait until that high-res version's been downloaded and then just show the high-res version, or if it should fall back. And that leads to, as you're about to see, a pretty great user experience and also a developer experience. So let's do that. So the API for that is we're going to create a resource from React Cache. And React Cache, as you just heard from Andrew, is a new package. It's a basic cache. It's from that's going to store basically anything that's asynchronous that can resolve to a value or a thing. And what it's going to allow us to do is it's going to allow us to access that in a synchronous manner. So we're going to create an image resource with our cache. And this is going to take an input, which is going to be the source. And it's going to return a promise. And in that promise, what we're going to do is we're going to make an image. And then we're going to assign it its source. And when the image loads, we're going to resolve the promise. Resolve. Okay. Cool. So now, back down here in our artist header, we're going to wrap this little area in suspense. We'll call this react.suspense. Just leave that for a second. I'm not going to press save just yet. Okay, just around our image. But what we're going to do is we're actually going to make this image component kind of like suspensified. And the way we're going to do that is we're going to make a new kind of image component with a capital I. And this is going to take the same props as a normal lowercase image component. So it's going to be source, alt, and we'll just props there. And then what's going to happen is we're going to read from the cache. Image resource dot read source, and we're just going to return a lowercase I image. And spread props here. So what's going to happen here is when this uppercase image, capitalized image, when it renders, and it gets to this part right here, this image resource. Remember when I said like you can access stuff synchronously? That's async. So that's what's going to happen here. What's going to happen here is the image resource.read call is going to find the nearest suspense ancestor, its parent, and it's going to React's going to pause at that parent and then make a decision. Either render the fallback and continue down the tree, or it's going to wait long enough for that data or whatever the value that's going to resolve from the cache is, and waits for it, and then it will provide it back to its children, or to you as a, this could be like, you could return it, so it could be like image itself. So what we're going to do now is we're going to use capital I image and lowercase image. This is a little strange. So as the fallback of our suspense component, we're going to put the image, but we're going to put the smallest version of it, the low quality version. And then we're going to use the same version of it, the same component, but with a capital I, to be the high-res version. And I made some CSS to make this more obvious. So this will be preview, and this will be loaded. Okay. So that was it on a fast connection. It just, the opacity animates in. But on a slow connection, and let's prove it even more. On a slow connection, what you're going to see is this comes in, and you'll see, hopefully, there we go. So you'll see it swap. So you'll see the low quality version go, and then the high quality version go. There you go. So you see down here, you have the avatar is the high-res version, or the high-res version is the HD, and the, can you see that? Yeah, you can see that. And so that's the low quality and then the high quality. So there you go. But to really like control this, you can set a max duration. And let's just say that with max duration, what you can do there is you can tell Suspense to basically the maximum amount of time that you're likely to wait before rendering to the fallback. So let's set that at like, I don't know, 500 milliseconds. Okay, cool. And let's just do it again. Let's see if we can get it to show. There it is. Okay, there it is. So with max duration, we can force it in there. Alrighty, cool. So that's great, because on slow connections, our users see something. But on fast connections, it's just exactly what you want. It's the high-res version. So we can go about doing that in a couple other places in our application, right? And my team has sort of been playing with this for a little while. And to speed things up, we started going through all the different kinds of elements that you'd want to suspensify. And so image is one of them, script is one of them. We sort of collect them all together in something that we're going to call the platform. So you npm install the platform. And it's crazy. All these people from Google love it. It's like this really weird, I don't know, they already know about it. It's awesome. But yeah, so there's image, there's script, there's video, there's audio. And all these components are like React Suspense ready. And so we're just going to use the image again. It's the same exact thing we just wrote. So let's go back here, and let's use image. Import image, I love this, from the platform. So you don't have to use this. This is just, but I encourage you to just write them on your own, but get lazy, whatever. So in album grid, same trick. Just use react.suspense. Set a max duration, 500 here, and the fallback. And we'll just copy this image again, do the same exact trick one more time. We'll do the low and the high, and we'll do loaded and preview. All right, there we go. Now our albums come in there too. So we're moving, right? Like we're making our app better. And that's sort of the point there. So that's the second part of I guess your movement to Suspense will be assets. And I said, as I mentioned, you can do this with audio, you can do this with video, you can do this with fonts. But you can also do this with data. And I will say that the data story isn't quite complete yet with React Cache, but it's going to get there. So it's pretty experimental, so use with caution. It's likely that if you're using an Apollo or a Relay, this is going to be abstracted away for you, so you won't need to worry about it. But we're going to clean this up and just show you how it might work. So artist albums. We still have these spinners, right? And we were just talking about how those aren't great. And we still have this loading state. With Suspense, as Andrew showed, and I'm about to show, you can kind of get rid of that in all this code that in a pretty nice way with the React Cache. So we're going to import unstable create resource from React Cache. And we're going to create a artist albums resource. And this is just going to be this little fetch here. And because it's the identity function, we don't need to pass anything. We'll just do that. And now we can delete all this. And we can delete this too. And we can delete that. And we can delete that. Okay. And now, instead, we can replace with albums. Actually, you know what? We can even delete that. You know what we can do? Artist albums resource dot read this dot props dot id. So all the albums just came in first, no loading indicator. We're in business. There they are. So what's cool about that is, let's finish those out. So they're in the cache already, right? So when I just did that again, so let's just do that again, they're in the cache. So once they're in the cache, and this is one of the things that's kind of experimental, they're cached. So if I come back to this page, let's allow new requests here. If I come back to this page, I go back and forth here one more time. The album's already ready. So as your user goes around your application, things will just survive in the cache, and those will be, like, the images also are going to be in the cache. So if they're on a really slow connection, the images are going to get cached because we just did our, like, image resource, and our JSON data is going to get cached. So if we went through the rest of the application and removed all this code, we'd have a pretty awesome experience, right? So as soon as the user downloads something, they're going to keep it. But one of the things that React Cache, the story is not quite finished yet, is with, like, invalidation and such, but it's getting there. So it's still pretty experimental, so use with caution, but it is a glimpse into the future, I think. So I hope the goal here was to show you a sort of realistic application and show you how you might approach moving to Suspense and some situations where you can apply it literally on Monday. So let's go back to our slides real quick. So the benefits of Suspense that I see are, it feels sync. So when you create a resource and you read from the cache, it reads top to bottom. And with JavaScript, that's kind of like a rare thing. So together with hooks and Suspense, it's sort of just, you can just look at a render function and understand what's going on. It's really easy to coordinate. So before it was somewhat challenging. I've seen some insane loading states, and I'm sure you have been in situations where you have to deal with multiple disparate loaders and stuff. But with Suspense, it's declarative and truly easy to reason about, because you remove the entire concept almost entirely. And it helps you get to this fast and pretty balance. So I mentioned before that when we're trying to optimize speed and performance, it's often at the cost of user experience, either on slow or fast connections, where you'd have to decide. But with Suspense, you really get the best of both worlds. So what happens on Monday? So first, start with your modules, react.lazy. Make sure you pass strict mode. And then move to assets. And then maybe think about data fetching, but maybe wait. And I want to show you one last thing, though, before we go. I'm going to go back to our app for 1 second here. Let's go back to index.js. And let's go back to react-dom.render. So let's turn off concurrent mode. And our app still worked, even with all that Suspense stuff we just added. So let's think about that for a second. So Suspense works without concurrent React. And the way it works is it automatically fires that fallback, that loader. So that means that you can still get all the DX benefits of deleting all that loading state without necessarily getting all the way to concurrent React. And even if you can't get your app completely safely into strict mode at the top level, you can actually use something called concurrent mode, this component called react.concurrent mode, and wrap parts of your application in concurrent mode. And so this is the idea, is that you can incrementally adopt this. Everything is opt-in, but it also works with the latest version of React without concurrent mode. So you get the same benefits, and you can prepare yourself and share components in and out of concurrent React. So I can't think of like a more adoptable solution than this that you can literally start as soon as you get to the office. So I hope that gave you a glimpse as to what's to come and sort of how to use it. And thank you for inviting me here. Thank you guys. You guys are awesome. Thank you, Facebook and the organizers. This was fantastic. So thank you all.